So, Mark, how are you feeling about these big Metallica shows next summer?
I'm not a massive fan, but they look fun. Like massive stadiums looks great.
How are you feeling about Pantera supporting at these big Metallica shows next summer?
That seems a bit strange to me.
So why is that strange? We need to explore what it is about Pantera, and more specifically what it is about Phil Anselmo, that gives you that icky feeling.
Let's get into it then. My name is Mark.
My name's Chris. Welcome to Unsung. We cover the lesser known stories from the music industry, and this week we're going to try and put some meat in the bones about the rumours that have dogged Phil Anselmo for the last 3 decades of his career. White supremacist? Racist? Just a bit of a steamer? Just a bit of a Ned? What is it about this guy that has gotten him this reputation? Is it merited? And if it is merited, do we have any sort of obligation to act on that?
Let's break it down, okay? So fundamentally, we're all consumers, right? Like it or not, that is what we are. So whether it's streaming, whether it's buying vinyl, whether it's buying tickets and merch. So as such, I guess we are probably somewhat entitled, if not, you could argue morally obliged to know where our money goes and who we're platforming with it. Because I don't know if you know this, man, but we live in a capitalist marketplace.
I've heard that.
Yeah. So your money is also kind of a vote as well.
Yeah. Very much subscribe to that.
Yeah, so which candidate are we really getting behind and how much do you actually know about that person? A lot of people are really behind Phil Anselmo just now. I've actually got a friend who really likes Pantera still just because she thinks that Phil Anselmo's hot. And she did say to me that, you know what, I know he's a racist. And I was like, well, I don't understand that.
I know he's a racist.
I don't understand that, right?
Not even, I heard he might be. I know.
Yeah, that's totally bizarre, right? So despite that, and despite a lot of other good feelings people have towards him, there's also a lot of controversy around him because he's, let's just say, maybe aligned at certain points in his career with the far right and perhaps even white supremacists. And Anselmo has more or less managed to kind of ride out all the storms over the course of, as you said at the start, 30 years. Loads of the details in the story have been really muddled and kind of missed over the years. And in light of his, I guess, new renaissance, his band, half of his band's new renaissance.
The reboot.
Yeah, we felt it was kind of appropriate to gather all those facts in the one place. I think it's probably quite important that we say we're not here to tell you what to think. We're just going to present the facts as we understand them.
That said,
yeah.
We're not presenting that without a hint of our own feelings.
Of course, yeah. So hopefully you can watch this or listen to this and be a bit more armed with knowledge when Anselmo comes up in conversation.
Yeah.
If you have had a bit of dubiety around how you feel about him, maybe
like your friend.
like my friend, maybe you'll get some emotional closure around it because there is a bit of cognitive dissonance there, I think, for a lot of people. So, Chris, where do we start?
So what exactly are the consequences of Sieg Heil in public in 2025? Because despite the fact that 2025 represented the 80th anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz, there's still no objective answer to that question. The results seem to vary wildly. I think if you do it in Germany or Austria, there's a good chance you get lifted by the Polizei. You do it on stage in the USA, though, and you could quite feasibly pick up a few $1 billion worth of government contracts and unrivaled access to the president. Or, it seems, a place on the biggest tour on the planet with Metallica.
So I guess in our lifetime, I say recent lifetime, this kind of really comes to the fore in 2016.
Yeah.
I think for many people who are involved in metal or who have been involved in metal over the course of the last 10, 15 years, they probably are at least vaguely aware of the Dimebash concert, right? Which was held in Los Angeles to commemorate Dimebag Darrell, the former guitar player of Pantera. One musician decided, you know what?
One pioneering
musician decided that I'm going to see how far I can push the boundary. And
how free is America?
How free is America? What can I actually get away with? And that man was, of course, Philip Anselmo. I guess he thought that his Sieg Heil would just go completely unnoticed.
Yeah, it was not subtle.
In the era of YouTube, 2016 was the era of YouTube, but what was he thinking?
Yeah, and he even underlined it. It wasn't just a Sieg Heil. He then roared white power.
Yeah, which is insane. And that's a memorial to his pal.
It's a hell of an ending.
You know, yeah, yeah. I mean, that's somebody that you're supposed to love and whose memory you're supposed to honour, and you thought, I'm going to take a swing tonight, boys. I'm going to take a swing. And he did. And yeah, almost a decade later now, the reanimated corpse of Pantera are shuffling onto stage with Metallica, as they shuffled onto stage recently with Black Sabbath, and of course the main man, Zakk Wylde, who seems to be a really nice dude, incidentally, which is
absolutely
kind of a bit perplexing. But yeah, they now find themselves about to open for Metallica in Europe in 2026. And this actually comes hot in the heels of a 18-date European headlining tour they did earlier on in 2025. And
huge.
Yeah, and then they've also got another
100,000 people saw those shows.
Oh God, yeah, and it's going to be even more when they play with Metallica. I mean, you're going to get that at least over 2 nights.
Yeah,
you know, minimum.
I think they've got 29 dates coming up in America as well.
Yep.
So, I mean, it's a lot of faces.
Aye, so there's like serious numbers. This is serious stuff, you know. And even as all bands are doing, because it's hard to make ends meet now on the road, especially if you're a big band like Metallica and or Pantera. You can actually do a meet and greet with him, and he'll scowl at you and shake your hand, and you'll feel good about that for $400. $400, yeah.
$400. It was one of the prices I saw, and I saw some reviews that were like, "Yeah, he didn't look happy to be there. It was over in a flash."
I don't know, like, this is a weird pattern of behaviour, though, right?
Yeah, let's talk about a pattern of behaviour, because the problem with focusing too much on that Dimebash fiasco is that it allows flimsy and kind of bad faith justifications. I mean, that has been very much the case to date. Too much alcohol is one. Oh, he was just trolling is another one. And they've been fairly successfully passed off as an excuse for not just his misdeeds that night, but his misdeeds more generally. That smokescreen, I think, has enabled millions of paying Pantera fans to hand wave away the evidence of their own eyes and ears in the interest of seeing their heroes in one more live rendition of Walk. You know, denial is a powerful thing. Mm-hmm. Especially when a band is so intrinsically tied up in the, carefully guarded nostalgia of countless 90s teenhoods. You know, when a band is so integral to you. I mean, Pantera were there was a point when grunge was taking over and Green Day were coming through, where Pantera were the only metal band really still doing it right. You remember Slayer had their dabbling with new metal and all that kind of stuff. With Pantera, you could still put your faith in Pantera. They were keeping a lot of people going at that time, so a lot of people are very attached to them. A lot of personal feeling there, and that does make you really vulnerable to denial, I think. And Anselmo's history with white supremacist rhetoric and imagery goes back a long way, but has been scattered, downplayed, obfuscated, I think, to such an extent that it's kind of easy to lose track. And so, as we said, in order to make better informed decisions on where we spend our money and what sort of behaviour we seek to excuse on literally the biggest of the world's stages, let's revisit those details.
Yeah, I mean, we've spoken a lot of times about how we individually make our own peace with how much distance we can tolerate with an artist that we really like. And Pantera seem to be, they're definitely, Phil Anselmo is certainly not immune to that. Maybe he is a lot less immune to that than some other people are. So this is probably the point in this conversation where the haters and all the people that are going to flame us on YouTube can just start to rub their hands and get warmed up, because we're going to go through Phil Anselmo's rap sheet now, because Dimebash is just the nadir of a litany of incidents that he has, done over the.
There's no question it's the
years.
main event, if you will. It's the most glaring example of it, but it's far from an isolated incident.
So let's go back to 1994. There was an interview he was conducting with MTV, which you can actually go and hit on YouTube. Don't do it right now. Do it after this, right? But you can go and see it for yourself. And he was asked a question about fans yelling white power at shows, and he basically just said, fairly glib explanation, he ain't them and they're going to say what they're going to say. I mean, but if you're paying attention, maybe that reaction isn't worth very much, because he is at that time, and as the presenter Kurt Loder had observed, he's wearing a 3-7 style logo, which is a triskelion logo, which is the de facto logo of the Afrikaner nationalism, which is to say the swastika
of South Africa. Yeah, it's a carnivore shirt, and it's a triskelion kind of well, it's not really disguised. It's sort of meant to look like the edges of a cube, but it's very apparent. And he wore that to an interview that was specifically answering these accusations of their fans shouting white power. That in itself is a provocative act. And yeah, Kurt Loder noticed that and commented on it. Yeah.
So, as I said, you can go and see that for yourself and perhaps make up your own mind there. We're not telling you that he did it because he's a racist, that he wore that shirt, but, you know, it's starting to look a bit strange, at the very least. The band behind that shirt, as Chris said, are a band called Carnivore, who are unsurprisingly no strangers to accusations of white supremacy themselves.
Yeah.
One of their most controversial songs is Race War and USA for USA. Now, Carnivore was the first band of a lad called Pete Steele.
I don't know if it was his first, but it was his like first proper project.
First known project
Yeah.
of a lad called Pete Steele. And you may know Pete Steele from the band Typo Negative,
Yep.
who have kind of gained a little bit of a renaissance in the last few years because sexy goth doing sexy goth stuff is always
Yeah.
going to be a sexy time. And yeah, it's true. But like, not only did he kind of have a few moments in that band where maybe some of his colours were kind of pinned to the mast a little bit, but he also openly...
Well, talking about being pinned to the mast, yeah.
Yeah, openly, he is known for openly popularising the flag of Vinland, which is...
Vinland, yeah.
which is a green and black flag, essentially. You've seen it in every single... I mean, green and black are Typo Negative colours
It's
anyway.
sort of like, yeah, it's reminiscent of like a Norwegian flag, but just with different colours.
Yeah, I think he had it on his amps. I think he used to put it over his amp.
Yeah.
So it's since been adapted as a sort of cryptic Aryan banner by a lot of white supremacist groups.
Yeah, it ties into this Nordic lore about Vikings and I guess Ultima Thule and all this kind of stuff. And the flag of Vinland is this great northern land of, you know, white Aryan, you know, Viking heroes. And he sort of like helped popularise this, but it's become a bit of a coded thing. Like if you see it in somebody's, let's say their social media, it's actually become a way to sort of signal to other people.
Oh,
Not
that's
always,
interesting.
clearly with these things, but in a lot of cases, yes, it has been adopted. And it's partly been adopted because of Pete Steele's history with these very provocative, racially themed lyrics in Carnivore in particular, but not just in Carnivore.
So if you're new to this show, I just want to take a wee second here to plug the fact that we actually did an interview with a former white supremacist called Arnold Michaelis, and we actually speak in depth about some of these Aryan symbols and symbols of white nationalism and extremism more in general as well.
Dog whistling, as it's commonly called, where
So-
only some people can hear it or pick up on it.
Yeah, you'll find a link to that in the description below, and you can, if you're interested, you can watch that afterwards. Getting back to Typo Negative, the track Kill All White People from their breakthrough record Bloody Kisses, which is actually a pretty cool record. It actually drips in edgelord irony and was, funnily enough, the exact song that big old party Phil Anselmo chose to join the band for on stage at Ozfest.
So gets asked, do you want to come on stage with us at Ozfest? And he picks Kill All the White People.
Of course, mate.
There you go.
Yeah.
It's got form.
So, Chris, what were the consequences, do you think?
Oh, you tell me.
Well, nothing really.
Teflon Phil.
MTV and other broadcasters continued to run Pantera and Typo Negative, and no, it was no big deal apparently. And I think one of the things that also gets my goat a wee bit is the fact that Typo Negative have not really been taken to task either properly.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's actually quite annoying because, like Pantera, they're actually pretty good in places. You know?
Yeah, and that's kind of why they're so potent, because they are good bands.
Yeah.
Unpacking that, I mean, Phil Anselmo loves provocative music, no question. So the Carnivore thing is consistent, right? As are his actions. Speaking to Decibel in 2016, he asked, what does today's young person really want? Do they want safe rock and roll? Do they want safety within their music? That's not how we grew up. Get that sentiment? He admires notorious deceased provocateurs like Seth Putnam and Gigi Allen, of course. In his own words, Anselmo revels in the way that those artists would trigger the peril clutchers of today. And broadly speaking, it's pretty obvious that he's an edgelord doing things to get a rise out of people. Yet nowhere is it written that you can't be both an edgelord and a genuine racist simultaneously. So because he had a history of being provocative, wearing a Triskelion, as we said, the image of Afrikaner nationalism to many people to the same extent as a swastika was in Germany, that is a very provocative act. And I don't think it's necessarily obvious enough to work as irony. It's like, oh, I'm here to apologise, but anybody that knows this logo will know that I don't really mean it. That seems to me an equally valid way to interpret that.
So let's go to the next item on Big Phil Anselmo's rap sheet. It was in the early to mid-90s. He's made a bunch of comments on stage, not just in the early to mid-90s, but they were kind of concentrated in this area. So They're actually fairly well known among Pantera concert attendees in this era. In March 95, somehow annoyed by the fact that rap artists were becoming more popular in the charts. I wonder what he would have thought now.
Yeah, he was annoyed at their rhetoric, if I recall. I think he said they were pissing all over white culture.
The thing that bothers me the most is the black rap bands and fucking rap and all the fucking white kids buying their albums and shit because they think it sounds neat and nifty, and they go to dance clubs and they dance and fucking say fucking X and shit like that. They dance to this rap shit. And listen, the rap bands, the majority of them, the hardcore motherfuckers, are pissing all over you white culture. They don't fucking want your fucking culture at all. They fucking dog out every white person that was ever born, and they don't know any of us. Do you understand that? In the United States where we live, the black people walk around with t-shirts and shit that say it's a black day. You wouldn't understand. And my favorite one of all is stop black on black crime. You know what that means? That means stop black people from killing each other. What does that say to you? That means it's okay to kill white people, doesn't it? That's what it means to me. It don't say stop fucking crime. It says stop black on black crime. It's okay to kill a white motherfucker, no problem. Well look, let me tell you what. Let me tell you what. If you walked around with a fucking t-shirt on that said white pride, you would be racist. You would be a piece of shit motherfucking racist, and you couldn't deal with it. From here on this point on, all you white kids out there, let me tell you something that no other motherfucking band, white band in the world has any guts to say. Let me say it right now. When you wake up in the motherfucking morning and you look at yourself in the goddamn mirror, look, hey, have all the fucking pride in your heart, man. Have all the fucking pride in the world, man. That's what I want to say. Because we are the great people. Hey, and you know what? Maybe, just maybe, tonight is a white day, and the black will not understand what the fuck I'm talking about. Does that make sense to you?
That's right. He said that at a show in Montreal.
Yeah.
And said that tonight's show in Montreal was a quote-unquote white thing. His hot take at the time was that the ongoing appeals within the African-American community to end black-on-black crime could and even should be interpreted as, if you're going to harm someone, harm white people. I'm not entirely sure how that logic follows, mate, but...
I mean, it's consistent if you take it to the, Black Lives Matter, and somehow that's suggesting that white lives don't matter, and that's clearly a leap of quite some effort, to twist that meaning. But, you've seen it. You've seen it. I mean, the All Lives Matter thing came around as a response to that, as though that the Black Lives Matter was suggesting that white lives didn't matter.
Yeah. So meanwhile, in his opinion, white people were not sufficiently proud of their race and thus unwilling to defend themselves. Rob Flynn, a machine head, he toured with Pantera twice in that era, and he also claims for years that he would always adjust a lyric and a new level to a new level of consciousness and power, and then would seek Heil and mouth white power to crowds.
Yeah, he used it as an opportunity.
Yeah, so...
For years, according to Rob Flynn.
I want to fucking hear everybody.
I mean, if you look on Reddit, you look on message boards all over the web, message boards are still around, folks. I mean, I know we're old, but they still exist. There's a lot of corroboration around this from a lot of folk, and these outbursts are just, they these are on these kind of message boards and stuff like that.
There's a lot of fans breaking with the band on those message boards, which I think is particularly interesting when you see people, it's just the final straw because they saw them do something at a concert and they're like, I can't ignore it anymore.
What are the consequences of that? Well, as word of mouth stories began to circulate, Pantera did begin to acquire a reputation as a band with questionable politics. But whether this had any impact on sales is totally debatable because they did sell over 20 million records worldwide and, as we've just found out, sell out arenas. So let's unpack that, right? Lyrics in and of themselves have always provided a little bit of wiggle room for artists so people can cast out on what the lyrics themselves are, the voice of the actual artist, or whether they're playing a character or they're telling a story.
Which is fair enough, you know, that's why they're so entertaining, because you can adopt all these different personas and perspectives, but it does allow a lot of helpful ambiguity, doesn't it?
Yeah, so the subjectivity of the interpretation allows for that plausible deniability, right? And people can take them any way they wish if they feel empowered by them or they feel as though they're just, you know, I mean, everybody knows that Bruce Springsteen was not talking about himself in Nebraska, for example. That's fairly clear. But there's a lot of people in Nebraska that can kind of go, oh, that song's about me. You know, or it's about people that I know. So they can be interpreted in many ways. And that's a good thing about them, like you said.
And it applies equally if you're insulted by them.
Exactly, yes. But on the flip side of that, we should also note that given that fans would regularly chant white power at their shows, that for a section of the audience, they did identify those lyrics.
Yeah, I think it is sort of poignant to remember that we're debating the controversy of this. Well, for a lot of people, unfortunately, there is no controversy. They're really happy about the fact that someone's doing it. So, next topic on the rap sheet, Confederate flags. What happened? This is probably one of the ones that's going to generate the most heat in the comments because it's a very volatile issue, right? So let's unpack it. Pantera's late beloved axeman, Dimebag Darrell, that we spoke about, famously played a Dean guitar that was emblazoned with the Confederate flag.
It was one of my images of Pantera.
Yeah, the significance of that flag is actually probably a bit lost on European kids like us of the 80s who grew up watching the likes of Dukes of Hazzard, where it seemed this very benign thing. I mean, I had a Dukes of Hazzard car. It had a Confederate flag on the roof of it. Never gave it a second thought. Many Americans prefer to call it the rebel flag and sort of sidestep references to the Confederacy altogether, which is a tall order. The flag shows up on the back cover of the 1996 Pantera album, Great Southern Trendkill, and appeared again in 2002 on the cover of the record Use Once and Destroy by another Anselmo's project, Superjoint, which, by the way, used to be known as Superjoint Ritual.
I remember them being crying quite a lot when they started, Superjoint Ritual.
Yeah, a 2023 show in Bulgaria, he spotted a Confederate flag in the crowd and actually said from the stage, one more thing, there's a person over there holding up this sign trying to ruin the fucking show. I disavow the fucking flag. I'm sorry, it's ridiculous, man. Keep politics out of shit, it's boring. So for everybody in the YouTube comments currently like hammering on their keyboard telling us about how it's just a symbol of pride, Phil Anselmo himself has thrown that flag under the bus, the best we can tell. So if you've got a problem with us saying it, have a word with Phil Anselmo about what he's saying about it. Unpacking that, Pantera are not the only act to use the Confederate flag at shows. Leonard Skinner are probably the most renowned, but they're joined by like everybody from Johnny Cash to Kid Rock, bastions like Kid Rock. Okay, Tom Petty, bit of a liberal pin-up. Tom Petty famously used it until there's an apocryphal conversation from the mid-80s that apparently made him consider that it perhaps meant the same to African Americans that a swastika might mean to Jewish people. And this issue of people misinterpreting the use of the flag is key to Pantera's, certainly their earlier justifications. And that was the band generally as well. That was Dimebag as well, his guitar, not just Phil Anselmo. Their take is embodied in that slogan, Heritage Not Hate. The contention within those three words is that the meaning of that flag is up for debate. Right? They would say cultural significance is subjective and there are differing but valid perspectives. To me, this stance seems extremely naive at best and disingenuous at worst. Dwayne Faria, a writer for the national security publication War on the Rocks, noted that...
Good podcast, by the way.
Yeah.
Really good podcast. I thought their coverage of the war in Ukraine is excellent.
Yeah, I've noticed that. So he said, quote, "This myth asserts that the Civil War was fought by noble men protecting their communities and had nothing to do with slavery at all. Instead, the Heritage Not Hate doctrine focuses on the honour, ingenuity and ferocity of the Confederate soldiers themselves, disentangling them from the cause for which they fought. Whatever else individual members of the government and military of the Confederate States of America may have believed, whatever their private thoughts on slavery, they took up arms in defence of one particular cause. The journalist Gene Demby, reporting for NPR in 2015 on the growing row around the Confederate flag, added, quote, "Growing up in the South in the 1960s and 70s meant growing up in a world dedicated to making that contempt polite and digestible. The Civil War was about states' rights, not slavery, and so on. There are shades of unknowing, willful or nostalgic or contemptuous, but unknowing isn't an excuse. It is impossible to claim in good faith that slavery wasn't the Confederate cause." In their use of the flag, Pantera and Superjoint are almost certainly not openly endorsing slavery. We're not suggesting that at all. However, they are engaged in a very bad faith conversation that seeks to play down the established associations of a powerful cultural symbol, whilst also sort of straw-manning the political conversation around it.
Yeah. So we've kind of discussed a little bit earlier on, or touched upon, shall we say, the lyrics of Phil Anselmo and his projects. So, I mean, is there really any kind of a better way to understand a man or a person other than the words they put out there?
Yeah.
Well, maybe. Let's talk about what happened. So, in 2016, on the back of the Dimebash debacle, cool alliteration there, the Guardian writer Dom Lawson quite astutely noted in an article that the consensus in the metal world seems to be that A, Phil Anselmo is a racist, and B, that we'd all like to disassociate ourselves from his actions. That apparently hasn't happened.
No, certainly
So, given that the former Pantera frontman has some form in this unsavoury area,
He's seen former at the time,
yeah,
bearing in mind.
then,
I know
yeah.
they're back together again, but
some questionable lyrics and several similar incidents during live shows, as we've already discussed. Many of us were neither surprised nor shocked by the instance.
yeah.
Like
So
I
this is
said,
post Dimebash, and people really starting to come out the woodwork.
previous excuses for Anselmo's bad behaviour, such as being temporarily blackout drunk, don't really account for the lyrics that are written and recorded with the input of the band and the producers, and across a period of months, weeks, years, records.
Yeah, I mean, writing and recording lyrics is a drawn-out process with other people privy to it. I mean, I get that some people turn up on the day and just start going for it, but you're still hearing it as the other members of the band, as a producer, as a record label, representative. A number of people hear that. It doesn't just land in the public's lap without going through some sort of vetting process. Debate rages across magazine pages and comment threads as to the actual meaning of various contentious lyrics from across the catalogue. The wording is often so vague as to render the songs something of a Rorschach test. You choose your own adventure for racists and anti-racists alike. Among the most difficult, I think, to swallow is "No Good, Attack the Radical" from Vulgar Display of Power, which runs, quote, "You blame oppression and play the role of criminals. To rape and burn, show progress is minimal." It's a tough one to square away for those looking to think the best of the band. Clearly a reference on African-American culture. That said, it's followed by the cryptic line, quote, "White hoods and militants, you know it's such a pity, living, breathing violence in your city." And so Pantera did like to leave things ambiguous enough that you could wiggle out of that. So it might or it might not be pushing in a different direction. As I say, it depends on your own pre-existing feelings on them. The lyrical controversies manifest not just within Pantera itself, but other Anselmo projects, including, as we mentioned, that blackened sludge thing, Superjoint. A section of the track, "Stealing a Page or Two from Armed and Radical Pagans," is often cited in this conversation. It goes, "Anti-Jesus Christ, no more of the coward Mohammeds, extermination of the Catholic guilty, thought suffocation, taking no pity on the Jewish elitists." Pretty hardcore. He's taking a swing at least three subsets of society there, all along. Yeah, I mean, Jewish elitists itself is a very dog whistly line. Coward Mohammeds, he had issues with terrorism in his various commentaries. If even that somehow still feels too vague to be damning, the line "Unholy war, you will get, you can bet, it's just bullshit, sand N-word." That's from their track "Personal Insult," and that's a little bit less discreet. The consequences, until Dimebash, some people had just been uneasy with many of Anselmo's lyrics over the years, but there wasn't any one moment of explosive outrage. Superjoint's guitarist Jimmy Bower was challenged on Anselmo's words and behaviour and simply replied, quote, "Is Phil a Nazi? Fuck no, he's a burnout dude." And that's really representative of a whole swathe of responses to Phil Anselmo's controversies. Unpacking it, lyrics are about as unreliable in making conclusions about singers as a book like American Psycho is when you're trying to understand Bret Easton Ellis, you know, and his attitude towards homeless men, or Huey Lewis for that matter. Many bands have been innocently or deliberately misinterpreted in their intentions. That said, as a lyricist, Anselmo seems to be building in a convenient vagueness whilst peppering the songs with all these dog whistles. What is not insignificant is that the lyrics are consistent with a pattern of potentially problematic perspectives on race in particular, but as I mentioned, Jewish elitists, coward Mohammeds, all that kind of thing. They're far from a smoking gun, but they do serve as a potentially insightful part of an emerging bigger picture that we're building here. Which brings us to the big one. Mark, you want to take this?
Yeah, so we started this story talking about Dimebash, so it feels as though when we come to, you know, the middle part of the story that we talk about Dimebash, which happened in 2016. So what actually went down at that show?
Yeah.
Well, it was held in Los Angeles, the concert, and it was held, like we said, in honour of Dimebag Darrell.
A lot of musicians to get together as well and show their respect and admiration for him because he was an influential guy.
Yeah, his guitar playing is hugely influential, yeah. So for it, Phil Anselmo performed alongside an all-star cast of metal musicians, including Big Dave Grohl.
Yeah, ubiquitous Dave Grohl.
Ubiquitous Dave Grohl. Rob Trujillo, also weirdly ubiquitous these days because Metallica are everywhere.
Yeah.
His best pal, Rob Flynn.
Yeah, ex-bestie.
And his new bestie, Zach Wilde.
Yeah.
At the conclusion of the last song, Anselmo is, of course, seen throwing the Sieg Heil.
Unmistakable Sieg
Yes.
Heil, yeah.
And shouting white power at the edge of the stage before he is, you know, somebody should have got a cane and did the thing when you pull, you know.
The hook thing on.
Yeah. Get him off. Yeah. So he was kind of shunted off the stage, which is a little bit awkward. So, as I said, his best pal in the whole wide world, Mr. Flynn from Machine Head, who, by the way, seems like such a right-on guy.
Totally.
He came forward. It was the first person that came forward to refute Anselmo's initial attempts at explaining the problem, and it was a problem for Anselmo at that point. And he revealed that an exchange had taken place backstage where he bumped into Phil and decided to strike up a short conversation as they were about to play a couple of Pantera songs together. And according to Flynn, within 30 seconds of sitting down, his drunk ass decided to let me know in no uncertain terms that he hated the N-word era of Machine Head, which I think he's talking about Supercharger, which is a new metal record with rapping on it.
It's a new metal record with rap on it, clearly, where he got those mad short dreadlocks that Rob Flynn had for a little while. But yeah, that's apparently the N-word era of Machine Head.
It is a rubbish record, to be fair.
It's a rubbish record, but yeah.
Awkward to say that to the face of Rob Flynn.
Double awkward.
I remember seeing Rob Flynn's video on that, and I remember it being all over the news at the time when it happened. Like Rob Flynn's coming out and saying that Phil Anselmo was a racist, and as we've already discussed, there's he's been part of the history of seeing it.
Well,
you know?
Flynn broke ranks. We'll talk about that in a second. Actually, what exactly were the immediate consequences, though? The show took place in the evening of January 22nd in 2016, and there was frankly no real traction for the best part of a week. The audience member that filmed it is a YouTuber using the title Chris R.
Hey, Chris R.
Yeah, if you're watching. Initially posted the footage of the gig and had removed Anselmo's outburst from that first posting. A revised, unedited video appeared on the YouTube on January 27th. Anselmo issued his first explanation the same day and brushed the matter off. The quote goes, "There's plenty of fuckers to pick on with a more realistic agenda. I fucking love everyone, I fucking loathe everyone, and that's that. No apologies from me." As mentioned, Rob Flynn was the first one to break ranks. On January 29th, he published this video disputing the excuses of, harmless backstage banter, saying it was about white wine. Flynn condemned Anselmo outright, highlighting a number of other incidents and comments that had been made by the singer. Clearly taken aback by the shift in tone, the next day, Phil Anselmo released a video filmed on his porch with a kind of stern, contrite expression.
I remember that as well.
In which he changed his tune considerably, stating, quote, "It was ugly, it was uncalled for, and anyone who knows me and my true nature knows that I don't believe in any of that." Heavy duty talk, heavy emotions were flowing, jokes were being made backstage. I am 1000% apologetic. So that's from 0% apologetic to 1000% apologetic in 3 days. That's quite a rate of acceleration. In the following week, there was an initial flurry of condemnation, albeit often quite mild, but numerous peers sort of seemed to feel the eyes of the world upon them once the video went fully public, including the Rob Flynn thing, and one by one they forced out these awkward platitudes about him having a need to do some soul search and things like that. For example, take otherwise famously likeable guitarist Zakk Wylde, who you mentioned, the guy who recently stepped into the breach on guitar for Pantera, presumably so they can continue selling concert tickets and not much else. He mustered up some courage and confessed to being, quote, bummed out at how, quote, sweetheart Phil could be so silly. Strong stuff, I'm sure you'll agree. Slayer guitarist Kerry King commented a bit more ominously that, quote, there's a line, I think he's crossed a little bit. Yeah, he may not come back from that. It was massive. Well, Kerry, turns out you were wrong.
Kerry's a notoriously straight shooter, as we spoke about on our Slayer episode.
A band that have faced their own controversy, albeit with far less there to it, as we spoke about on the Slayer episode. Largely a lot of nonsense in their case.
Yeah, he doesn't take fools gladly.
Yeah.
Or Kerry. So there's practical implications here for both Pantera and, I guess, Anselmo more broadly.
They're a bit more substantial.
On a lot of his projects, the sludge metal band Down, who were dropped from Holland's Forta Rock Festival. The French government also pulled a €20,000 grant from Hellfest, citing Dow's scheduled appearance on that bill. And in 2019, two Phil Anselmo and the Illegals concerts in New Zealand were cancelled, just a fortnight after the Christchurch massacre, and given the ongoing white supremacist accusations.
Yeah, so a lot of that Shooters Manifesto made reference to things that were not a million miles away from some of the subjects that we're touching on here in Phil's background.
In 2023, Pantera saw their Rock am Ring and Rock im Park festival appearances in Germany pulled due to public outcry. Some might unkindly point out that Phil Anselmo might have been particularly upset about the latter, given that
the Rock im Park?
Yeah, the Rock im Park one, because the show is always held at Zeppelin Field. So it presented an opportunity to perform at a fabled Nazi rally site.
Yeah, that's right. It's a very, very famous site of one of Hitler's rallies. Yeah.
And the band's stop in Vienna was also cancelled, which is
nicht gut.
Nicht gut. So let's unpack that, right? Anselmo has varyingly acknowledged, denounced and tried to justify his behaviour, sometimes all at the same time.
Yeah.
His now infamous excuse that his comments were some manifestation of a backstage joke involving white wine, which everyone had been drinking, were given the short shrift by Rob Flynn. And it is one of those now ludicrous...
It's a meme.
Meme things, yeah, it totally
you
is.
say to your mates, a wee bit racist.
Too much white wine.
Aye.
Totally. Flynn said that I was there and I can tell you for a fact it was not a Chardonnay or a Pinot Grigio in sight backstage.
Yeah. People actually started forensically analysing the photographs to the point where people were blowing up images of bottles in the background and other folk were coming and going, no, that's a vodka. I know what vodka that is. That's not white wine. I mean, it became like a real thing to try and establish.
That's mad, isn't it? A later narrative began to emerge that Anselmo's gesture and shout were made in anger after he was being heckled.
The heckling excuse, I've heard
In
this.
his word, the second I stepped on stage until the bitter end of that night, there were a couple of kids with an absolute agenda constantly, all night long, calling me the dreaded R word, racist, racist, racist. You can check the video for yourself. Can you hear the kids? No, you can't, but I most certainly did.
Can you hear the kids? No, you can't, but I did.
Aside from Anselmo's decision to seek Heil being highly questionable, even if that were true, the main problem with his excuse is that his bandmates from yet another project called Scour were also on stage that night and didn't witness what he described.
Yeah, so we're talking about if kids are shouting racist at you, to respond to them with Sieg Heil, it's maybe not the best answer you could have come up with, even if that was the case that they'd been doing that.
Yeah, so John Jarvis from the grindcore band Pig Destroyer confirmed that some audience members were down the front and were indeed shouting at Anselmo during the concert, but they were saying, you guys are heavy metal.
This doesn't even sound like racist.
I know.
You guys are heavy metal.
And he was on stage next to Anselmo at that time, and he never heard the word racist being said, despite being a few metres away from the people who were screaming, you guys are heavy metal.
Yeah.
And given that Scour had just completed an album, his reaction to Anselmo's Nazi salute was noteworthy. Along with his other Scour bandmate, Derek Engman, he explained, we didn't go backstage after it happened because we were just like, what the fuck was that? Did that really happen? Walked back to the hotel that night was kind of questioning if Scour should ever happen. Those types of actions can end any band, and for the record, Scour did continue and are still
didn't end the
continuing.
band, yeah.
Jarvis and Engelman held their breaths and waited for the inevitable fallout in the press. Quote, I remember driving home and being like, how could this not be a news story yet? Said Jarvis. And then I thought, well, maybe it didn't happen. Maybe I was just wasted, which raises another very pertinent point. Where was the outrage and what took so long?
Yeah, the sound of silence. As mentioned, Chris R, the YouTuber who posted the Dimebash video, originally edited those scenes out, only to later repost that footage, and he's explained why. He said, I originally cut this from my first post of Walk, but I feel people deserve to see this. A very sad moment, and to me ruined the night. This is not what Pantera is about. Absolutely uncalled for, and I can see why Vinnie Paul wants nothing to do with this man. Phil Anselmo, you're a racist prick. Despite the clarification in the repost, it's interesting to consider what might have motivated Chris R's reluctance about the original video. Now, on one hand, he was clearly a fan, and who in their right minds wants to bring the roof down on one of their own heroes. But there's also the risk that a highly vocal and volatile fan base such as Pantera's would turn on him for doing so. There's no doubt that Pantera and Anselmo enjoy staunch support in this matter, and more generally, anyway, to this day, multiple closed comment threads testify to the level of vitriol and hate speech that the subject elicits from the band's acolytes. There's so many threads have had to be shut down as a result of just getting completely out of hand on this.
So, on January the 29th, which is a week after this whole debacle, celebrated rock journalist Paul Brannigan,
Yep.
who was writing for Louder Sound at the time.
But used to, I think, got famous in Kerrang, didn't he?
Yep,
Yeah.
he did. Observed that a certain major rock magazine's websites have, at the time of writing, failed to even make mention of the incident. A shameful, negligent oversight which speaks of editorial weakness.
Mm-hmm.
Alongside that, Axl Rosenberg of Metal Sucks bemoaned how the press allowed Anselmo's behaviour to avoid scrutiny and become metal's worst kept secret. Mm-hmm. His theory was everyone's either a friend of Anselmo's, people want to tour with them, or somehow otherwise benefit from his notoriety, and nobody wants to piss off his fans. Now, interestingly, Metal Sucks have recently been doing a lot of posting of videos of Anselmo and Pantera saying, "No, that actually looks pretty good" and stuff like that, and being a bit more positive about it. I don't know if Axl Rosenberg still works there. Maybe not. Who knows? But Rob Flynn acknowledged that he and his bandmates had to seriously debate the minutes ago in public, given the potential damage it might do to the group. And I think that's a really fair thing.
Yeah, I can imagine.
You know, because they're a big band, but they're not as big as Pantera. Flynn basically echoed Rosenberg's frustrations and referenced the past experiences. Nobody calls him on it. I've talked to people on so many tours, and they say, yeah, Anselmo's up there, Sieg Heil and mouthing the words white power. Why don't you call him on it? Oh, because I love Pantera, man, and who wants to start shit with him? Yeah.
Yeah, that seems pretty typical.
So coverage in the music press since Dimebash has kind of struggled to make peace with the facts of the incident. In a 2022 Blabbermouth article, they were kind of still tiptoeing around the matter, saying Anselmo made a Nazi-style salute. Nazi-style salute. And that he appeared to say white power as he made the gesture. Appeared to say white power, yeah. But both are pretty clear and verifiable, and they're matters of records, not even Mr. Anselmo himself dispute. Meanwhile, reviewers in esteemed publications like The Quietus have demonstrated alarming emotional investment in London and Phil Anselmo's image with editorials that have aged like milk.
Oh yeah, I've read a couple of stinkers, yeah.
One good example being Mark Eglinton's
I think the guy's name is. Yeah.
2013 angle that Phil Anselmo has matured in ways both as a musician and as a human being, and quietly gone about his business of playing his music, all while everyone else sat and whined about what he did or did not do. Was he something of a dick in the years 1998 through 2004? For sure. But so was I, and so were you. It's all ancient history.
I like how understated you put that. I feel like he's actually like banging on the windies as he's saying that.
It felt like it had to be understated to me. It's like a quiet word with a pal. You know what I mean? You were a dick back then as well, mate. So was I.
Was that? Aye, we're all dicks sometimes, though. We all see Kyle and shout white power sometimes. Who doesn't he?
To be clear, though, at the time of writing that, Anselmo was yet to, see Kyle on stage and yell white power in front of a packed club.
Yeah, well,
he had done it before.
He's talking about how he's quietly gone about his business of playing his music just prior to him see Kyle.
Yeah. So that ancient history that Eglinton referred to might actually be more specifically pinpointed as 1930s Germany.
Yeah, sadly, yeah, ancient history indeed.
It's okay, Chris. We were all dicks back in the early 2000s.
Is it metal at fault? I mean, in his video response to Dimebash, Rob Flynn raised another interesting point. Only in the metal community is something like this so brushed off. This is him speaking. I haven't felt connected to the metal for some time now. I don't get it. I don't get how this shit is tolerated. Brushed off is acceptable. If there's a place for that in metal, count me out. Metal has a long history of quoting militaristic imagery and extremely dark themes, we know that. Bands like Rammstein and Slayer were the brunt of many quite tenuous claims regarding their own alleged far-right sympathies on the basis usually of lyrical themes and sometimes aesthetics. And sure, at the extremes of that issue, there is certainly a reasonable debate to be had whether or not that's okay. Whilst the kind of high camp of Rammstein might make that allegation seem a little bit absurd, the troubling revelations I think about members of Marduk shopping on neo-Nazi websites raises real questions, given that Marduk also spent years brushing off criticism of their German military fixation and Panzer Division album. Oh, it's just a name. What do you mean? Well, they're actually shopping on neo-Nazi websites that were caught bang to rights doing that. The explicit white supremacist and racist credentials of numerous other bands, including a glut of Scandinavian black metal groups, many of whom continue to do very well, are beyond question. Yet I think, as Eric Clapton showed in the 70s and as Kanye West demonstrates now, far-right bigotry is clearly not just a metal issue.
I think I saw the other day that Mayhem are about to record a new record, so, still going. Advocates for metal like Joseph Schaefer, writing for the site Invisible Oranges.
Another good blog.
Yeah, very much so. Particularly value the extremity in metal for the cultural conversations that it enables. Yep. He says, to quote, "To me, the core of this genre is a love of radical freedom. People like metal because metal is free to express parts of the human condition that are frightening. Most metal shares desire to be free from hierarchy, usually in the form of government and organised religion. Which may be to say that metal fans tend to not like being told what to do or think, whether via official decree or moral blackmail, as they might see it anyway." Elsewhere, in his scrutiny of Pantera, Dom Lawson, again of The Guardian, mused of the unity of the metal subculture, saying that its defiance of the unjust, claiming that metal is at its best something that punches upwards against the establishment and the status quo, not downwards at those less fortunate. Are you listening, Phil? However, Mr. Rosenberg, again at Metal Sucks, following Dimebash, isn't as optimistic about the genre and the scene, perhaps publishing the strongest repudiation of Anselmo's pattern of behaviour, as well as the silence of the musical community up to that point. In his article titled "The Metal Community Must Stop Letting Phil Anselmo Off the Hook for His Racist Remarks," he asked, "Why does the metal community continue to let behaviour like this slide? The simple answer is we're cowards. We're fans of Pantera and Down, and yes, Superjoint Ritual, and we don't want to have to face a conundrum of whether or not it's okay to admire someone for his talent while loathing his personal politics. Somehow, Anselmo has achieved untouchable status." So this kind of instills in many of us a blind devotion, which in turn has allowed Anselmo's behaviour to avoid scrutiny from media outlets, Metal Sucks included, and become metal's worst kept secret.
Yeah, I mean, whilst acknowledging that scrutiny of the genre is fair and even necessary, a guy called Alexander Bile, writing for Jacobin magazine.
I do like Jacobin.
Yeah, places the blame more directly at the door of Pantera and Anselmo themselves. Heavy metal does not have a racism problem distinct from the larger American one. What heavy metal has is a Phil Anselmo problem. Tolerance for Anselmo's rants has long troubled a great many metalheads of colour and anti-racist fans of the genre, precisely because it has provided a cover for the seedier, more overtly fascist elements, always lurking on the fringes of that scene. But heavy metal's cultural influence should not be ceded to those like Anselmo. The band's rage was not rooted in a dream of a better world so much as a rejection of the current one. In the voice of its most alienated and damaged subjects, it's a nice way that he puts it here. It was beauty achieved through vulgar displays of its own ugliness, power that refused to come into its own unless the stink of the cesspool rose with it. As Bailey points out in that article, there are much larger cultural mechanisms at play in this story, some of which Anselmo has benefited from. Post-truth and gaslighting are all regrettably important parts of contemporary Western politics and society. Defences of Anselmo frequently seem to have a very familiar, surreal quality.
So let's go back to where we started, right? And that is, unfortunately, the Sieg Heil.
Yeah.
The posture of choice for American cultural provocateurs, it seems. A newfound fuzziness has kind of been applied to the gesture, partly out of the pure necessity as the Trump administration continues to fight the frequent neo-Nazi rumours.
Yeah.
The fact it's become part of the popular cultural lexicon is just utterly wild to
Through
me.
the looking glass.
Yeah. On the back of Mr. Musk's transgressive 2025, that happened this year, folks.
Yeah, it's
2020.
amazing how quickly you forget it.
I know. On the back of his inauguration performance, a lot was made of the traditional Roman salute. Your man Alex Jones has a lot to say about that, I will tell you. It would be a good body swerve indeed if any such thing had ever existed, but it didn't. Alex Jones,
Yeah.
pay attention.
The traditional Roman salute, the thing that didn't actually happen.
So that pose was lifted from an 18th century painting called Oath of the Horatii.
Horatii?
I thought like Horatio, so it's like Horatio.
Horatii, you might be right.
Horatii. Then co-opted by the controversial Italian author turned megalomaniac Gabriele D'Annunzio.
D'Annunzio. Yeah.
I'll denounce him.
Very interesting character, but we don't have time for him today.
Ended up being assimilated into the rituals of the fascist Italian state under Mr. Mussolini.
Yeah, so basically Annunzio got it from a painting
Yeah.
that he found inspiring because of the theme of the painting, and then Mussolini got it from Annunzio, whose movement was doing really well at the time. He's like, that's quite a good thing. Let's just take that.
I hear Mussolini's got a really nice necktie. Maybe mercifully, though, unlike Musk, very few Anselmo apologists are even bothered to pretend that Anselmo was paying tribute to Julius Caesar. It was much more common to hear how the Heil was due to historic alcoholism and drug abuse.
Yeah.
And it was more common for it to basically be said he's just doing it to try and get a reaction out of folk.
Yeah.
But the triggered masses have kind of fallen for this cunning scam. Phil Anselmo is... Before it was even a thing, he was just trolling the libs.
Trolling the libs. He's a pioneer, isn't he?
And we've touched upon this before, but a lot of contemporary fascism manoeuvres in these waters, right? The days of neo-Nazi skinheads, such as our good pal Arno Michaelis, are long gone, right? People don't openly flash swastikas about anymore because they don't have to. They don't even have to, Modern far-right outreach is basically just a tapestry of snowflake baiting, internet shit-posting idiots and people that love a good old dog whistle. So, we've talked about the man quite a lot. Let's figure out who he actually is.
Yeah, all of this mess kind of leaves us asking, what do we actually know for sure about Phil Anselmo? Well, it is established that he's an alcoholic, that he's a former drug addict, and according to a 2016 interview that he did with Rolling Stone, he was a victim of abuse.
That was his apology interview, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was, yeah. We also know that he's a lifelong edgelord who looks up to artists that courted notoriety via their own controversial speech and extreme behaviour, G.G. Allen for one. But the issues seem to run deep with Anselmo. As Paul Brannigan noted after Dimebash, quite frankly, there is too much of a pattern of controversial and racist statements being made by Phil Anselmo for him not to be labelled a racist. Mm-hmm. The YouTuber Brian Storm of the Smart Metal Show on Metal Sucks acknowledges sometimes being a fan means calling out your heroes. He embarrassed you and you're embarrassing yourself if you're coming out and strongly defending him. In his aforementioned 2016 piece for Metal Sucks, Axel Rosenberg again wrote, Anselmo says he's only joking and we choose to believe him because we want to believe him, but it's nonsense. There's absolutely no evidence to suggest that Anselmo is just kidding around. If anything, the fact that this issue has repeatedly reared ugly head throughout the course of his career suggests that not only does he believe what he says, but he believes it so strongly that he can't help but let it out, even when he knows it's going to make him look bad. It's Mel Gibson syndrome. The guy works in an industry surrounded by Jews and African Americans, but get enough drinks in him, and he almost involuntarily starts to drop racist and anti-Semitic epithets.
Just starts to unwind.
Yeah. I mean, even the late Vinnie Paul, a founding member of Pantera, said in 2016 about Phil, he's done a lot of things that tarnish the image of what Pantera was back then and what it stood for and what it was all about.
So how do we come to a conclusion on this? Is there a useful conclusion? Well, towards the end of an interview with Jay Bennett from Decibel Mag during the media apology tour of 2016, Anselmo was asked if there was anything that he'd learned from the Dimebash fallout, and he said, quote, well, I definitely know to retire the old white power joke. Haha, yes, Phil.
Yeah.
2 words and 1 hand gesture do not define my fucking career. Well, he was actually kind of right. It turns out it does not define his career.
Well, I bang on.
He's bang on there. It's an implausible and fairly delusional sign-off to a conversation that exemplifies another contradiction in Mr. Anselmo. He has spoken frequently about owning it in reference to the actions of Dimebash.
Yeah, I mean, he has. He's like, oh, I'm going to own it, I'm going to own it. And then you see nothing but equivocation.
Yeah. And a word of bigots, neo-Nazis, fascists and white supremacists, there aren't many admirable qualities to be found in abundance. Yet, whether we are talking about good old-fashioned racist skins or even the hardcore true believers of extreme metal, such as, you know, Varg from Mayhem,
convicted murderers, Hendrik Mobus.
Hendrik Mobus. We can at least concede that some have the forthrightness to proudly own their odious beliefs. Despite his claims to own it, no such grudging acknowledgement can be made of Phil Anselmo.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about it with Arno as well. It's like you can't like, you know, the neo-Nazi skinheads, but they're fairly upfront about what they do. They're fairly open and honest about what they do. And even with Varg Vikernes, who is a deplorable human being.
Odious individual.
Absolutely. But he's honest about it. He's like, this is what I believe. This is what I think.
Who I am. Mm-hmm.
There's a grudging, not admiration, but at least merciful gratitude that you're like, thanks for not playing like stupid games. Thanks for just at least saying what you think so we can be open about this disagreement. You can't even say that about Phil Anselmo. There's just so much subterfuge and evasion in it. You know, behind his hard-boiled, rough, tough, you know, southern hick shtick, what you find seems to be an on-off white supremacist who lacks the courage to admit that which he clearly seems to believe. He's chosen to duck behind any number of wafer-thin apology videos and justifications whenever his income seems threatened. Very possibly Phil Anselmo struggles to form any cogent worldview as he tries and fails to reconcile his own backwards attitudes, whilst also maintaining, I'd imagine, mixed race friendships within the music scene. He's in an industry, and he'll have. I mean, even backstage at Dimebash, there were one of the guys that he was having some kind of edgelordy joke with, an African American friend of his, and it's like, so he's trying to walk that line, but clearly, especially with a drink in him, the finesse goes. You know, he seems, and he often looks confused at best, and the history of substance abuse almost certainly hasn't done his mental faculties any good. But does his slow process of power, you know, make his semi-regular platforming of deeply problematic rhetoric any less harmful? Clearly not. I mean, ultimately, the audience will make up its own minds on this man. Many almost certainly already have, and I'm sure we'll hear no end of it from one side of that argument, certainly. But hopefully this episode at least helps cut through all the noise and the obfuscation around Phil Anselmo, so we as musical consumers can decide where we spend our money, who we advertise on our t-shirts, and who we choose to accept as flawed but redeemable individuals versus toxic, dishonest bigots. And for sure, it's perfectly possible that someone could be all of those things.
So, as we said at the start of this episode, we're not here to tell you what to think. We're just here to present the facts as we
in one
know
place
them.
Because it's been so scattered, and to try and put everything in one way so that when this conversation comes up, because it does keep coming up, you're like, I kind of know quite a lot about that, and so I feel like I've come to a conclusion. It doesn't have to be a radical cancellation, but at least you know better how you actually feel about it.
Yeah, and if you still like the band and you still like the man, at least you'll be armed with knowledge as to how to maybe formulate your opinion around that and how you can square that away.
I mean, some people are very, very capable of separating the art from the artist. I've got good friends. They're very principled people and have no problem with that.
Same.
I'm not like that, but that's their prerogative,
Yep.
and that may be your prerogative as a listener. But at least you know the case that we're making here, and we're not resorting to histrionics. We're trying to be fair-minded about it and realistic. But yeah, things like the bullshit about the flags, you really need to read up on that stuff. The bullshit about what these various Sieg, Heils and salutes mean, you need to read up about that stuff, because I'm sorry, a lot of the narratives that get repeated are just not based in fact. So hopefully we've at least dispelled some of those.
Yeah, so we're really keen to hear what you think, right? So Whether you're listening on a podcast, you can talk to us on our socials, which are all at Unsung Pod. Apart from Twitter, we're not on there anymore. And if you're watching on YouTube,
because the owner insisted on the Roman salute.
the Roman salute, yeah. And if you're on YouTube, then please like, comment, and please do comment. We will respond to your comments, and we're really keen to know what you think of this issue. And let's have a discussion about it. But also be nice in the comments, right? Let's not start wheeling out some racist words and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, but please do get in touch if you have some strong thoughts. If you like this show, if you enjoyed this episode and you're like, where can I listen to more of the stuff? Well, it's all over YouTube, but you can go to unsungpod.net. And if you want to go a step further, then you can sign up at our Patreon. Chris, what's the Patreon all about?
Yeah, patreon.com/unsungpod. You can join the podcast at the lower level, which means you get bonus content, you get it early, you get access to our closed group of members where you can suggest episodes, and we do interact pretty frequently with people on there. You can also join the record club, where you get sent records by independent bands from independent labels. The money goes to them. It is exponentially more money than they get from streaming services, so it's designed to help everybody. But ultimately, just hit subscribe on this channel. That's the simplest thing you can do right now as you're watching this.
So yeah, thank you very much for listening / watching. We hope you enjoyed this episode. We will be back really soon with something else which will be unsung. Join us then.
See ya.